we'll get started on going over the agenda. I do want to take a moment at the beginning to welcome Paula Miranda, who's been on the job for a year. This committee hasn't met for a year, but we'd like to welcome Paula and maybe have Paula, if you'd like to say a few words here at the beginning and introduce yourself to the folks that you don't know. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure thing. And thank you, Heather. Yeah, this is, I heard about this committee, and of course we have been working with few folks here and there throughout the year, and but I never got a chance to fully introduce myself to everyone. I wish we could have done this in person. Of course, times are kind of different, so we have to do it this way, but I just want you to know that I truly look forward to working with you all, and whatever happens out there is very important to us, to the port, and I know the community. So I don't take lightly anything you guys bring to us. We will make sure that we are looking at everything you bring to us with a lot of respect, and make sure that we try to address everything the best manner we can. Sometimes, there are a lot of stuff on the inside you may not be aware, and why we're making certain decisions. All I would ask is to give us a chance to talk to you and respond to any concerns you have before going out there and getting upset. In other words, we truly we want to make sure that we respond to everything you guys bring to us. And I know Aaron and his staff is out there doing a great job, the best they can, and they already tend to listen to you guys personally. And I truly appreciate from working with Aaron and his team during this past year. I have full confidence in what they do and what they bring. So again, I appreciate you guys, and anytime once this is all over, you guys want to stop by and say hello, please be my guest. I look forward to working with you.
Is Terry Ann's iPad, Mark? Hello, Terry Ann's iPad.
They might be muted.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Let me unmute, but.
Okay.
Terry Ann's iPad, who are you?
It could be Ted.
It's probably me. My wife's name's Terry. It's her iPad I'm on.
Except that, Jean, you're already on here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm going to put that person, I'm going to put you back in the waiting room, Terry Ann's iPad. If you want to follow the meeting, it is being streamed live on YouTube on our channel, which is Port of Newport Commission Audio. Unless, I hope if it is somebody that should be here, they'll give somebody a call.
That might be Mark.
I just got a hold of Ted Gibson. He was going to try to get on.
So for people that haven't done Zoom meetings yet, I've done a ton of them. They work pretty well. It's best if you keep yourself muted if there's background noise, so that it doesn't interfere with the rest of people's ability to hear. It's kind of an awkward way to hold a meeting, but it's what we have right now. So I appreciate everybody taking time to get on today and talk about these issues. I'm thinking about Paula's opening comments, and in the past, the committee has come to the commission with issues, whether they're suggestions or challenges or things like that. But we're also available to be a sounding board for the commission. And so when Sarah was liaisoning, what she would do as well was take, things would come up during commission meetings and they would say, oh, this is a good idea to run by the Commercial Fishing Users Committee. And so we're available to do that. We have, I think later on we should talk about how often we want this committee to be meeting. For a while we were meeting pretty frequently, and obviously we haven't met for a year now. So we should decide how we, if we want to meet more frequently or just meet as issues come up. Mike, are you trying to say something?
Nope.
Okay, because your box is circled yellow, so I didn't know if you were trying to raise a hand or not.
Moto Z, you're not connected to audio. And who are you? Can you maybe call somebody in the meeting to say who you are?
So since we all have a lot going on, I think we should just keep moving through the agenda. Hopefully Moto Z is either Ted or Mark.
So let them call so we know. Hopefully they'll call.
Yeah, maybe, or text, you could text me, 541-272-4544 and let us know who that is, Moto Z, that's joined on without any audio. So I guess I've started talking before I called the meeting to order. Let's go ahead through the agenda. Everybody should have a copy of that. Does anybody have any changes that they'd like to see to what's listed here on the agenda? Okay. So Karen, was there any public comments submitted prior to the meeting? You're muted now.
You're on mute.
There was not.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
We've got 3 sets of minutes to approve from December of 2018 and then March and April of 2019. If we don't have a quorum though, I guess we can't do that. Is that correct?
I'm here, Heather.
Oh, Mark, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for pulling over and calling in.
Sure.
I read through the minutes. They looked good to me. Does anybody have any concerns about the minutes? Do people have a chance to go through them? Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Mark. Is there a second? Jean, is that you trying to second?
I will second it if you need one.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So Karen, did you get that? The motion to approve all the minutes as presented by Mark, seconded by Mike. Is there any opposition? Okay, that's done. Motion passes. The next agenda item is the best practices for fishing vessels and plants across the port during COVID-19. I had brought this up and had some conversations with Paula and others. You know, a lot of the MTC boats, as you know, participate in Alaskan fisheries as well as West Coast. I was really struck by the difference in what is being required and mandated up in Alaska versus what's being required or mandated down here. And while I'm not looking to put a whole bunch of mandates in place down here, I thought it might be helpful to kind of understand what some of the best practices are and share that information across the port. I know there was some concern about a bunch of out-of-town squid vessels coming in to the port. I saw some stuff on social media and elsewhere. I think from my perspective, well, first of all, I don't think it's possible to close the port, but I wouldn't support that anyway. Almost all of our businesses are delivering fish into other ports besides where we're home ported. So I think that's kind of a slippery slope to go down to prevent people from coming in here and providing commerce. My understanding, at least in that particular situation, and Paula can correct me if I'm wrong, that the people coming in to town had provided some temperature logs or some other things on the boats, that they were following some best practices on the boats before coming in, and whether they were coming off the boat and going around town, I don't know. But and so I wanted to hear from the rest of you all about, you know, whether having best practices was something that we wanted to see happening in a sort of a systematic way. And then I see Rebecca Austin's on here from Lincoln County Health, which I've been working with. Really thankful for Rebecca and the other people that work with her. I've been trying to get some testing program going for the start of hake season. And it's a pilot program right now that we're hoping we could replicate in the future and expand potentially to make it a model for other fisheries and other ports for people that are interested.
Excuse me, Heather. That
Yeah.
was Dave Thalman was the one that was at Terry Ann.
Oh, okay.
He's trying to get in. So
If he's still there, we should let him in then.
he says he's going to try and get back on. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jean. So Rebecca, do you have a presentation? Is that right?
I certainly can talk, sure. It's nice to see you in person, kind of, Heather. We've been talking on the phone and over Zoom for a while now, so this is great to finally meet you. And I really do appreciate you and Katie inviting me to show up at your meeting. So yes, I would definitely encourage the port to bring in some best practices, and I have sent out a flyer that I think you're going to make sure that people get in their hands. I think that is probably outlines the best practice for everybody. And then there are some specific things that you may want to apply to the vessels. So just so everybody knows, we aren't real good hand washers in our society, generally speaking. And when we do wash our hands, sometimes we just stick them under the faucet and then dry them off and go. So I think it's important to know that the soap is the key element and the friction are the key elements in making sure that you don't have live virus on your hands. So the surfactant from the soap is what breaks down the protein around the virus. So those two things, soap and water and scrubbing, are really, really important. And then probably the most challenging thing for the vessels and maybe even the fish plants is that 6 feet distancing, keeping people 6 feet apart from each other. They're just finding, of course, you know, this is a new virus, so we're learning every day about how to get on top of this. But 6 feet away from other people seems to be one of the key factors besides the washing your hands and don't touch your face. So on vessels and even in the fish plants and other work sites, we are highly recommending that they stagger times that are normal for people to be in the same vicinity. So like breaks, instead of everybody going on break at the same time, stagger those so you have fewer people in a room together. Also, meals can be done the same way. So you just need to start thinking a little bit differently. And this is probably going to be like this for a long time. So the sooner we can adapt, I think the better. So then, of course, don't touch your face, your nose, your mouth, especially with unwashed hands, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. So that's a habit we need to get out of for sure. And then in our workplace, we are required to wear a face mask when we're in common areas. So if we have a workspace where we can close the door, we don't need to have a mask on, and that's why I don't have one on right now. But as soon as I go out into the common area, I need to put a mask on. So that's something that when 6 feet can't be met, that potential for wearing a mask, and cloth masks are fine really at this point, because we have such a shortage of the N95s that we want to preserve those for our healthcare providers. And then, of course, avoiding any crowded places. So don't let people back up on the docks. Don't let them, just keep the flow moving the best you can. And that's a big adjustment for everybody as well. We just don't want crowds. And now, I don't know if it's happening with you, but when I see something on TV with a crowd of people, it freaks me out. So I do think that's where we have gotten into some trouble across the country, is when there's crowds of people. So that will probably be a long time until we lift that barrier. And then finally, the last one, and probably the most important one, is, and why we've partnered with Heather in getting your trawlers all tested before they go out on their 2-week stint, is that sick people are, pretty sure of transmitting virus to others. And the tricky part with this virus, and why we take all these other precautions, is that you can actually be shedding virus or transmitting it to other people and you don't even know you have it. So, but when you do think you are sick, absolutely, you need to get tested. So I think one of the messages we want to give to our crew members is that even if they have just a sore throat or a headache, they are really expanding the symptoms these days. So they should get a test for sure. And it used to be that testing was so hard to get that we had really locked down who could get tested. It was pretty much people that were really, really sick. And now that is changing rapidly. And even though we're not doing a lot of asymptomatic people, like Heather said, we are going to be testing the trawler group of crew members. And we also test anybody that's working in congregate care settings. So all the long-term care facilities, the group homes, and the jail staff, we can go ahead and test them if they want that. So things are opening up. And so I would say anybody with any kind of symptom that is flu-like, including some kind of odd things, which are just happening now, which I mentioned already, the headache, some digestive diarrhea symptoms, and also when you lose the sense of taste or smell, if that's not something that you've experienced before, then those are other signs that you should be getting in touch with your healthcare provider to have them order a test for you. So that's the other thing that I want to make note of, because many people in our community, for whatever reason, maybe don't have insurance or haven't established care with a primary care provider. And so we're really starting to push that message out, that there are places in the community where you can get a test if you don't have insurance. Our federally qualified health center here in Lincoln County is mandated by law to provide services to everybody, regardless of their ability to pay. And we do have a sliding fee scale. And right now there is really no fee for getting COVID testing. So that may change in the future, but for now, that's the case. And also just getting established with care is really important. A lot of younger people, and they're perfectly healthy people, are not doing that. So we're really trying to urge them to call either the Samaritan or our Lincoln Community Health Center and get established. So it'll be so much easier when they do come down with symptoms to just call up that provider and they'll write an order to get tested. So those are kind of the areas that I would say are best practice. And then like Heather mentioned, there are some real big differences between the Alaska guidelines and our guidelines. And I think some of that stems from the Alaska crews being in much more remote areas. And when they do go to a port, there's really no services for them. So fortunately, we don't have that situation here. And we are in the process now. Just reviewing the Alaska guidelines, I noticed like, oh, they're so out of date, because we are really moving towards opening things back up, and we need to begin to adjust to the, it was so nice when we had the stay home and stay safe, you know, which is still in place by the governor, but pretty much everybody was isolating. And now as we think that the governor is going to be lifting that sometime this next month, that's going to make our life a little more challenging, because people aren't going to be expected to stay home as much. So it becomes a little bit more challenging for public health to make sure that people are abiding by the rules that we see that will protect our communities. So yeah, it's going to get very interesting. But I would say that there's a couple sections in the Alaska guidelines that captains of your vessels will want to take a look at. You know, just some tips on how to keep people away from each other the best you can in a really small area. And then what happens when somebody does become sick. And just for the captains to think through that, like, is there a place where they could possibly isolate somebody if they did become sick and you weren't able to get back to port in a, you know, in a quick way. So I would definitely recommend getting those out and letting people take a look at them. We're happy to answer any questions. It's been a real pleasure working with Heather on getting the trawler crews all up and running. And we're kind of fingers are crossed that we're going to be able to pull this off. Because I don't know if you come up with a number or not yet, Heather, but 100 people will, we've only tested slightly under 500 in the county since the outbreak. So 100 people, boom, boom, like that in 2 days will be really stretching our capacity. But it's so right on for us where we are with this reopening that we need to be able to ramp up our testing. And it'll be really good practice for the Samaritan Depot Bay Clinic to see what it would really be like if we needed to start sending 100 people through every day for them.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think I'm at 70 people, 70 crew members right now to get tested. And it has been, for me, a really big learning experience about what happens under emergency management protocols and how those evolve week to week. You know, the fishing industry, you all have been categorized as essential, as you should be. You're producing food, right, for the nation, but then we couldn't always get the services we needed as an essential employee. And so we're really thankful for this pilot to test people who are asymptomatic and see if they are carrying the virus or not carrying it. Because if you're going offshore on a hake trip for 2 weeks, you don't want to be 2 days in and then find out that one of your crew members has the virus. So I really appreciate the partnership. It took several weeks of pushing though on different places before I got connected with the right people, with Rebecca and others, and then going through the governor's office as well. And like I said earlier, it's something I would like to expand beyond just the hake crew for people that are interested in that. So in terms of best practices, we can easily share what we've been using for people who haven't seen it up in Alaska. It's really strict on certain things. They're requiring, 14-day quarantine before you get there, 14 days after you get there. Crew members are not allowed to leave vessels and go into fishing plants. I believe one of the companies is putting up all their workers are being quarantined for 2 weeks in hotels with guards outside, making sure they're not leaving. Because if you do get sick and that spreads up in Alaska in particular, like Rebecca said, in some of these locations, they have one ventilator or no ventilators, and they have some real vulnerable populations up there. which we don't have exactly the same situation, but we do have a lot of vulnerable people on the coast, and we all just, want to stay safe. So I'd be interested in hearing from other committee members if you think, so following the stay-at-home order, I've been working from home. I actually went to the terminal today for the first time in a few months to pick something up, and there's a lot of activity going on. So I'm wondering from you guys that are out working at the terminal or at Port Dock 5, are you finding people taking this seriously? Do you think that we need to do something more? Do we need to provide information on best practices to folks, or what's your sense of what's happening out there? And don't forget to unmute yourself if anybody wants to talk.
Heather, this is Gene. Yeah, I'm finding that everybody's really paying attention to this. You go to any of the marine stores anywhere, you got to stand behind the line. Or in a lot of other places in town where you want service, you have to call them up. They can see you on the other side, but they'll bring it out to you. So everybody is paying attention.
Okay, that's good. Any other thoughts? What about for people that are like using the hoists and stuff? Carrie or Mark, how's that going?
I'm trying to unmute to say that. We, back when the social distancing first came out, we took it pretty serious at the unloading dock. And we put up signs. We don't let people come in our little office anymore to sign their fish tickets. We're doing a verbal, we just say to you outside, like, this is what your weight was. Do you agree to that? Because I heard that they were doing that in Alaska. So I figured that works here. Mm-hmm. And we usually have our crew go down on the boat to help unload the crab. And we have not done that anymore. We've reduced our crew size. So that way we have less guys on the dock and it's easier for them to social distance. We're trying to keep them separate from the people who work in the office, all that stuff, and keep the fishermen separate. And we have signs up that say, like, please, keep your distance and stay home if you're sick and all of that stuff. So trying our best to, it's definitely not the Alaska situation, but we're trying our best. If we do have to go on a boat, we ask, we had a couple times, there's a captain, he's alone. So we have him go inside and then our crew goes down to kind of keep people separate. But that's what we've seen.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment? Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, our vessel's out of the water doing a project right now, so we haven't been fishing the last few weeks. But since we have Rebecca on the call, I'm glad to hear that the testing is loosening up. I think the environment on these boats, it's pretty hard to stay away from each other when you have 4 guys, sleeping in a forecastle where you can't stand up, put your clothes on, So I'd like to see a situation where people could get tested, before they're really ill, voluntarily. Get tested to assure one another that we don't become incubators on these boats.
Yes, well, like I said, I think we're going to just see more and more of the testing open up and more asymptomatic people being able to easily get a test. As Heather's probably finding out, it's still complicated because it's a health procedure. So we need to get people's, permission to do it. We need to figure out how we're going to get them results or if they're not in our healthcare electronic medical records system, So it's still complicated, and it's mainly because our healthcare system is complicated and complex. So, just trying to work the best we can within the system we have. And I really do think that getting the the trawlers group through this first wave for us to really work out the kinks and see how we can just make this the smoothest process as possible will really inform how we can go forward and, you know, testing more port people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that day too, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and the turnaround time is pretty good. But remember too that a test is not everything. So you test, you still have to follow all the best practices, and because then you could go to Fred Meyer and pick something up, or right. So you have to still follow those best practices. But yeah, so far it's been a little bit of a challenge, but I think we're getting there. For the hake boats that are getting tested, it's going to take place on May 8th and May 11th for the start of the season, which is the 15th. And it gives a day or two to replace crew if you need to, for folks that might be ill. I'm not ill, but I'm about to cough because my window's open and I have allergies.
And we noted she coughed into her elbow.
I guess the only other thing I'd say about the best practices, I had heard complaints at the terminal previously. I guess the first one was maybe 6 weeks ago, or maybe even, yeah, probably around 6 weeks ago, that some people didn't feel that fishermen were taking the issue seriously. I don't know which boats or which people. I did send out an email to at least the MTC members and some others, just reminding people to take it seriously. Even if you don't believe it, you could be putting someone else in danger. And so I know that maybe some of the, I don't know if it was port employees were uncomfortable, or maybe it was some of Sarah's workers or something, but I know that the port has put things in place, keeping the warehouse door closed potentially, or just don't go walking in the warehouse, call instead, those types of things. And then recently I did hear some more complaints, maybe about a week and a half ago. I sent out an email to the people that I work for, just reminding them, as all the boats are coming back in from Alaska, to take this seriously, and that people are paying attention, and some of the behaviors making others uncomfortable. Go ahead, Paula.
Yes, so I want to emphasize on that, Heather, because I know in the beginning, especially, one of the reasons that our guys have to close their doors is because some people were definitely not taking it seriously. And as I was talking to Aaron, you know, we are trying to implement all the measures we can out there, but reality is, if folks can't abide by them, it's very hard for us to stay open, you know, because we do not want to put our employees in a bad position where they're uncomfortable to come to work. At this point, we're in essential services, and we would like to keep offering those services and not have to shut down. But if, again, we're having a hard time managing it, that could be something that can be done, and that's the last resort. But certainly, you know, having all the help we can get to keep our folks safe so they can continue providing those services is very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about supplies? Are people having trouble on your boats getting any kind of supplies? I know I've heard from some of my boats that you know, they're trying to get masks, they're trying to get sanitary wipes and whatever, and having trouble getting those. Is that a problem for anybody, or? No? Okay. So I don't know what folks want to do, if anything, with this, but I had started to draft up a one-pager best practices document pulling from the Alaska mandates, and I just didn't get it done in time for this meeting. And I guess I wanted to see if people thought it was something that we should be doing, And then we could put it together, working together with the port, and just have it available at the marine stores or hanging up at the docks. If it's helpful, if it's not helpful, it sounds like people are, according to Gene and others, taking this really seriously. So I don't know how far this committee, if it's the role of this committee or not, but it seemed like a good thing to run by you guys and see if you were interested in taking it further, or if you think we're good. Silence.
So Heather, this is Rebecca, and if I could just give my input on that, I think possibly getting the poster out for the prevention, and then maybe some cleaning guidelines from the Alaska guidelines. I think, the problem with the Alaska guidelines is it could overwhelm people. So I'm always telling my staff, if we can't get it on one page, then don't put it out, because people aren't going to read all that stuff. So that's why we're using a lot of pictures. And so I just think a one-pager, and if you want us to work on that for you, I do have staff that do work on messaging all day, every day. That's what they do. So we could probably develop that for you if that would be helpful.
I think that would be great. What do others think? And
was there anything else that you wanted from that other than I think the cleaning and then the poster are really two key things.
Yeah, those are the two key things. And then there were some tips in there on social distancing on vessels. At the end of the day, Bob's right. It's hard to stay 6 feet away from somebody in such a small space.
Right.
I guess in the fact that it's hard to social distance, maybe the emphasis really is more on the cleaning procedures. And I don't know if crew members are actually wearing masks or not. I know on some of my boats they are. So
that would be the best practice if you can't social distance, then to do really good hand washing and wearing a mask. That's what I would prefer, but I know wearing a mask all day is a drag too.
I had one point that was raised to me a little while back was that so you have to think, if you're on a boat, you'd be wearing a mask not just all day but all night too. You'd be sleeping in it and everything else. So an observation that somebody made to me was basically people who are working on a boat together for days or weeks at a time are much more similar to the social distancing measures that a family might take inside of their house. And it's easier to treat them as such. Although you're not going to have we don't have a quarantine order like what Alaska has when they come ashore, but it just, wearing a mask, especially for those time periods, also has a little bit of risk to it as well, depending on the, if anybody's got any respiratory issues or anything like that. And those are things you got to think about. But, if you're going to be on a boat for 2 weeks with the same people, it depends on the crew size and the size of the boat, but masks are sometimes, because like I said, you'd be wearing them all night when you're sleeping and stuff too. So I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do right now with this testing is that, so say on the 8th, people get tested. They then are to self-isolate until they get on the boat. And then when they're on the boat, they're staying on the boat. So say they get tested on the 8th, we get the results on the 11th. They'll go to the boat if they're clean after self-isolating for the weekend, and then they will not get back off the boat. Other people are bringing groceries to the boat, they're doing whatever. And if everybody's tested as clean and then they get on together, hopefully that's another step toward protecting the crew, who will then be together for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. So we're trying to, so Rebecca, that'd be really helpful to have your people put together a one-pager focused on the cleaning guidelines. I think it's the right thing to do and could be helpful to some folks. And unless there's any opposition from anybody else on the committee, I'd love to see that.
I would just add also, you know, I realize people can be contagious when they don't seem sick, but also they can seem a little sick and be contagious. And so maybe just also mentioning, I know on our own boat, it's a small boat. We're not able to just like stay on the boat for the whole period of time, but we're trying to make sure that the guys that we are with are like our family and that they're being smart as well, and that no one is allowed on the boat. They call in if they even feel a little bit. And it's funny because we have like everybody hypochondriac, you know, even going to like, think I have a tickle in my throat, I better not go. But it's been good. I mean, it's delayed fishing a little bit, but it's been working. And I think most of the small boats I've been talking to are doing the same thing. I mean, like a guy has a stomach, his stomach doesn't feel well, the boat didn't go fishing, you know, and I'm getting that call a lot of times because I'm talking to the boats that are crabbing still, and they're all saying like, you know, I couldn't go today, the guy had a scratchy throat or whatever. So I think that that's being smart as well, just making sure if they don't.
Okay. Anything else on this agenda item?
One minor thing
Sure, Bob.
that I wanted to ask about. I haven't been around the docks recently, but I had heard that there was an advisory through the port for the regarding the influx of squid boats from Southern California and the Puget Sound, asking them to side tie to one another so that people didn't have to walk across the local boats and, you know, and mix that way, climbing across the boats. Is that true, and has that been observed, and is it being enforced, Paula?
So basically, yeah, I heard from a few of you about your concerns, specifically about folks side tying. And again, one thing that I mentioned is sometimes it's hard for us to see people coming in the middle of the night and doing whatever they're gonna do, but we just don't have folks working at all hours and, you know, at all places. But I did put something added that to a memo and send it out asking folks not to do it. Probably what I should do now is ask folks that if they intend to do it, to do it only with the approval of the other boat or the approval of the port. So in other words, our preference is for the boats to coordinate amongst themselves, making sure that you are in agreement. Sometimes you do know the parties that are tying to your boat. So the concept was more to do with that than anything else, because we don't want anybody that you don't know just coming and walking all over your stuff. You know, you don't know who they are, where they've been, and so it's one added precaution that we're putting out there. And talking to Heather, I understand, especially at the terminal, it's very difficult not to do side tying. So I understand, as long as there is that understanding, we're not going to make a big deal about it. But if people come in and do side tying without notifying the other boat or the port, that is prohibited.
Okay. Good. So I think that wraps up this conversation. Rebecca, you're welcome to stay on if you want, but I'll just let you know that if you have other things to do, we really appreciate you taking the time. I know how super busy you are to talk through this, and we'll be in touch both on the project, but also on the one pager.
Yeah, no, this is great. So thanks so much for inviting me. And I'm always available if you have any questions or anything.
Great. Thank you so much. The next thing we were going to talk about is just get an update on the finances. We have a new financial person at the port. Well, new to us, but he's been here, I think, for a while. I've heard really good things about Mark. I was interested in just hearing about what our situation is like, and have we taken a downturn because of COVID-19, And then if everybody remembers, within the last, well, more than a year ago now, but Aaron, and at the time the interim general manager, had come to us and proposed a fee increase where the increase was targeted for some electrical upgrade work. And so we wanted to hear about how that was going, and just any general information on the finances. So Mark, did you want to give a short presentation, or?
I've included information in the packet that was sent out. I did a little digging into sales, specifically at the commercial marina. And that's why you see the sales data, fiscal year 2019 versus fiscal year 2020. So hoist dock sales are down a bit. The moorage is up about 76,000. And I didn't include the total other services. It's just a brief update there. So overall, the port is taking a small hit with this, primarily over in the recreational marina. And it's becoming bigger now that we're closed through the end of May. Because short-termers, we just don't have them right now. On the commercial side, we've not seen a big downturn. We've taken and set money aside to help us with the electrical upgrades. I'll let Aaron get into that because it is in our budget packet this year to do the engineering for it. But no, the port overall, including the international terminal, is doing okay through this crisis. So I have included, you're going to see a sheet that has, well, it looks like that. One says annual in the moorage fee / linear foot. The other says semi-annual. Those are the moorage. So annual moorage versus semi-annual moorage. And what we're calculating there is at what footage is the break-even point for the port. So where does our cash flow begin to be positive? So in the annual moorage, it's actually at about 86 feet. In the semi-annual moorage, it's at 55 feet, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at the port. And that's what that was really about. And then you have international terminal and commercial terminal profitability statements there this year versus last year, so you can see how we're doing. And I sure invite any questions if you have them.
Okay. Aaron, did you want to talk about the electrical upgrades, or should we take questions on the finances first?
I got so that was part of this report that I've got coming up on that Port Dock 5 agenda item. I can talk about it now if you like, or
let's just wait. Let's wait.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions on the finances? I was listening to the Port Commission meeting the other night on Tuesday, and it sounded like there was some issue around the halibut fishery reopening, which, can you talk about that a little bit, Paula, and whether that impacts South Beach or?
Yeah, sure. So that does not affect commercial. It's mostly recreational. And yeah, we have been working with ODFW and trying to figure it out, because originally they just posted a tentative date out there and we were not involved. So, but maybe they didn't realize the type of issue that we would have here trying to manage a whole bunch of people coming to town. And what I've been trying to tell folks, and we get calls every single day. Mark and Aaron and I get calls every single day from folks saying, why is the ramp closed? And the issue, it's really not about the marina itself, but more to do with being a good partner with the city and the county and trying to prevent all these tourists coming, flooding into the town and to the supermarkets and so on. We're just trying to, again, be a good partner on that. And that's the reason we closed the ramp to the general public. However, you know, especially now that we're getting close to halibut season, people are getting very anxious about it. And I understand that when people are ready to go fishing, they're ready to go fishing. And it will be very difficult for us to manage people trying to break the rules and trying to get into the marina no matter what. So with that said, I've been bringing this up through some of our regional solutions meetings. Every week now we have a meeting with the governor's folks trying to figure out how to get through these times. And then we all came to the conclusion with other ports. It's like we're concerned about the halibut season coming and this tentative date here mid May. We decided, actually I talked to the county too, we decided let's, you know, reach out to ODFW and see what they're doing about that. And we've been having some good conversations with them. And they told us, well, they didn't realize the difficulty that this would be for the marinas, you know, to be closed, trying to be closed by some of the orders out there while the season is open. So right now they still have a tentative of May 14, but they're assuring to us that they want to work with us. You know, if that needs to be delayed by a week to whatever to coincide with, you know, the losing of these restrictions, perhaps, you know, that is something that they're watching to see if it's necessary. So I've been getting emails almost daily, and at this point the tentative's still there, but I have a meeting actually with the county folks tomorrow and with some of the local ports on Wednesday to figure out how we can do this, pair up the opening of the ramps at the same time, you know. But I've been telling the county it's going to be hard for us to keep it closed if the halibut season is open, you know. So we don't know yet what's going to happen. But again, we are working with ODFW, we are working with the county and obviously the city and trying to figure out the best way to do this. As I've been saying all throughout, we're not going to make everyone happy. It doesn't matter which way you go. There will be some upset folks, either because we're open and letting people into the region, or because we're closed and people just want to go out fishing. So,
okay. Questions? Anybody have questions for Mark on finances or?
You get me, Heather?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, a couple of things. On the halibut side of it, last year when that opened, that parking lot, you couldn't have put another car in there with a shoehorn. It was, people were parking out alongside and down the road, and I actually got a parking ticket that was later dismissed, but it was, I was parked out along the roadway there, and the officer that gave the ticket said I should have parked over on the other side of the aquarium, which is a long ways away when everybody's sitting there waiting, trying to get their boat put in, and you can't move your boat because you're walking half a mile back from where you had to park your truck. Anyway, you know, I just see people coming to the fillet tables, and the whole 6-foot thing is going to be out the window. I mean, they're going to be elbow to elbow at the fillet table like they always are. And, you know, I don't know how big a deal it is to anybody, but if that halibut thing goes on, that place is going to be a zoo like it always is. And relative to the finance end of it, you know, we talked about needing electrical updates and all this, which I fully support. One thing to keep in mind, the fleet, with the restaurants closed, a lot of the seafood products that we normally bring to town, the prices of those things have just plummeted. And the interest interest in the buyers on some of those things has really gone down. So some of the boats might be looking at a somewhat limited income source compared to what they normally have. So may not be as good a time as some other times might be for increases. You know, that's all I had.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I have been contacted by Senator Merkley and others on trying to calculate the impacts of COVID-19. And we know that with restaurants closed, that some markets have just completely been eliminated. People will go out to eat seafood, but they're not as interested maybe in taking it home because they don't know how to cook it or whatever. You know, there was that 300 million for fisheries that came out in the CARES Act that's supposed to be distributed to the states. Tomorrow, NIMS is supposed to be announcing the formula for how the states are going to be receiving that money. $300 million is really nothing compared to the value of the nation's fisheries. So I don't know how much of that will make its way to Oregon. But I wonder in this round and the next round, and I can talk with Paula and Aaron, if there aren't opportunities for some grants and some other things that might become available to assist fisheries related stuff. So we could talk about that offline. I didn't really think about that before right now, and Mike's comments are really good. You know, it's hard sometimes to quantify the impacts, but like one of my friends who's a trawler up in Astoria, you know, they used to deliver weekly, and now under COVID-19, they're on a 3-week rotation. So one fishing trip every 3 weeks doesn't generate a whole lot of income for that boat. So it's a really good point, Mike. Other comments, Paula?
Just to address a couple things. One, what you just said about the funds. We are right now working with Representative Schrader on trying to bring some funds for ports. And I don't know how, if any of those funds will be able to pass on. You know, we'll see what happens. But just today, they actually asked me to put out a quote from the Port of Newport on the letter, you know, to help with this letter that Schrader's sending out to the other legislators. So we'll see what comes out of that, because up to this point, there has been zero full ports, no money whatsoever. And I know there are a lot of ports out there completely struggling. And at the port right now, it's doing okay. But then again, as Mike Pettis indicated, you don't know how things gonna be in the next few weeks as people start struggling, you know, how that's gonna affect the port, and maybe how the port can help some of those, you know, some of the fishermen boats that are having difficulties through this program that they're trying to put the port into, if we're not directly being affected, but indirectly, you know, so we can help out. So we don't know. We'll be watching out for that. We'll most definitely will share if there's anything we can do. As to Mike Pettis' comment about the fillet tables, you know, is good measure from, you know, Aaron here and his group. We're already starting to remove some of the hoses in the middle of the tables to give that separation. So unfortunately, it'll be less people being able to work on the tables, but at least there will be hopefully some separation there. I don't think we can really do much beyond that, as he believes if we don't have the tables, people will just throw guts everywhere and it'll be even worse. But if indeed we have to open, we don't know yet at this point. Hopefully we'll have a bit more control of that. We're looking forward, you know, to see what may end up happening and trying to create some measures for that. So.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Paula or Mark? It seems to me that the port, oh, go ahead, Bob.
Something regarding the fee schedules, something that's been brought up to me and that I agree with is a small alteration in fee schedule. Amongst the crab fleet, which has got to be in excess of 100 boats, I think the majority of those boats have sold at least part of the time over the port facilities. There's a lot of commerce by a lot of boats. If the boats have a bait order in while they're unloading and it comes back while the boat's unloading, it goes on the boat and that's covered by the live buyers. If a boat comes by, say a day or two later, or when the weather's clearing up to load bait, the charge is for an hour. I think it's $43 and change, something like that. Often that's a 5-minute visit. And I was wondering if we can make some accommodation to where it's not $43 to throw the bait on the boat. If the tie-up's less than 15 minutes or something like that, maybe it could be $20. Instant by instant, this is very, very minor, but I think with so many boats doing this cumulatively, it's worth considering. So it's something I'm wondering if the committee would support something like that to take to the commission, or if it goes through the folks on this call.
Hey, Bob, we did in fact hear that earlier in the season, and we did adjust some of the charges we were charging to bring those down, because it was $115 basically, because we charged an hour of labor, an hour of forklift time plus tie-up time. So I think we changed the labor rate, if I recall, so we're charging in 15-minute increments. So I'll work with Aaron on that. We're glad to always look at it. And
okay, yeah, thank you, Mark. A lot of the time when we do this, we don't need a forklift because the bait's deposited within the arc of the hoist, and so it's really brief. And if there is no forklift, maybe we can get it below the $43, or I'm not sure if that's the exact figure, but if it's just a touch and go type of tie-up. Anyway, this has been brought to me. I'm wondering if any of the other committee members are in agreement with that. This seemed like the right place to discuss this.
Does anybody have any comments on that? Carrie?
I know I spoke with Mark Newell about this too. I don't know if he's still on the call, but that's one reason why he called in today, actually, for this specific reason. So it is a lot of boats that happened to that got charged $115 for about a 5-minute boat load up. I'd say under 15 would be clear. There's also some extra charges that go into that too, which is, say our bait guy delivers the bait, it gets unloaded by a forklift, we got charged an hour. Then you have them move it to the circle for you, and then you put it on your boat, you got charged an hour, and the whole transaction probably took 15 minutes. So it's kind of compounding as well, to where you were looking at almost $200 to take bait off of a truck, and then a boat come an hour later and load the bait, which is a lot, and it's a lot of boats. And I think we can see when we look in the numbers that the unloading income has went through the roof for this year so far, and we've been doing really well for the port. Unloading a lot over the dock, even in these uncertain times. And a lot of boats have been supporting that. And that being said, if it becomes uncost effective for boats to where their bait costs become so high, you add $115 every time you got to pick up bait, plus the increased costs, that we are only able to offer them. All the live buyers have increased bait costs compared to processors, because processors are able to put up their own bait, and it decreases their cost. It's just a reality. And sometimes it's a big difference. And then you add $115. I have boats coming over saying, I'm not going to load here anymore. And maybe that just affects me, but I think if we look at the numbers, I think that that affects the port ultimately. And we want to keep this really nice pattern we have going and the commerce that's coming across the port's dock. And by that, we need to be fair with the charges to make boats be able to continue to sell over there. So I think that I did talk to Mark about my own personal charge on our own personal boat, and he was great. And he said if any other boats find those bills to snapshot them. I snapshotted it to Aaron. Aaron got it right over to him. He called me right away. It was all dealt with within a couple hours. So I think that I commend the port for that. But it is kind of, you know, I don't know if you read all your bills. So you got to go in and look and see which ones were bait ones. But I'm glad that the port's trying to do something about that, because it's hoist-wise and forklift-wise. We used to have where you could get a tote out of the back of your truck. This also affects you. You just have like a crab pot in the back of your truck. You have like 2 of them. If forklift come over, say, hey, you want me to unload those? You go, yeah. He takes them off, you know, $78 later, you get a bill. So anyways, and it's because we used to have guys at the port all the time, the forklift guys. They knew you. They didn't charge for that kind of stuff. But we have a whole new crew, and they're just doing what they're taught. But they're not doing favors for you or anything like that. They write it down as they've been instructed to write it down. So that's part of it, I think.
That minimum charge actually was a change. If you guys think back last year to that meeting where we talked about the cost of, I went through all of the rates, and we talked about the rates and the costs that are involved with them with the commercial fishing user group. It was actually a recommendation that we talked about quite a bit that came from the commercial fishing user group to just charge for an hour a forklift. So that's how that rate got changed. We knew that it was not going to be a real good thing once it got implemented, and sure enough, this is what everybody's seeing. So please, if you guys see it on your bills, bring them on in. We'll get it taken care of as quick as we can. So we understand it's an issue.
Mark, did you want to add anything?
No, I agree with Carrie, and yeah, I thought we had a half-hour charge for forklifts, but I could be wrong.
Gene?
Yes, you know, it's really tough on especially the smaller boats. I see more and more of them packing bait down the docks with wheelbarrows. And now with the dock being closed, it's a long way to go to some of those boats way out on the end. It makes things real difficult for that reason too. That's why they're going less and less going over to the hoist.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is there are concerns. The port is trying to address those concerns, and in some cases fixing them. If it's just been a couple of minutes that were actually used and they're getting charged for more. It sounds like we made the recommendation as a committee to move to a 1-hour forklift charge. So I guess I would support revisiting that if it's not working out. I don't know if that's something that you're already looking at doing. It sounded like Mark was saying there, and he's nodding yes. So I think we should support our small boat fleet and our unloading and try not to. I think part of it was people were maybe not at this hoist, but I know at the terminal, people weren't getting charged for a lot of stuff. And we were trying to make sure that all the revenue that we could collect was being collected. And maybe we just went a little too far with that. And now it's negatively impacting people, and we don't want to do that. At least I don't. Go ahead, Paula.
I just want to make sure that you understand that there's no interest of the port in, you know, creating these additional revenues for, you know, things that are not getting, you know, no service that are being provided. But At the same time, Carrie, I totally understand that, you know, sometimes when you have a crew that knows you, everybody wants to be friendly and all that, and people may do things for, you know, as a favor. But the problem is we do have very few people doing the services out there. And they pretty much have heard from us saying that we shouldn't be providing services for free because they only have so much time to do work. And by the time that, you know, you're running here, running there, doing favor for folks, we're not charging, and you know, other services that could be done, it's not getting done. There's just not enough people out there even to do the service that it's needed in general. So it's a difficult one, as much as we would like to, you know, do folks favor. You know, we shouldn't be treating anybody differently from being a friend or not being a friend, know you or not know you. We are a public board. We really should be servicing everybody the same. But certainly we do not want to overcharge anybody for anything. So we'll keep working on any of those issues here with my directors and making sure that everything that is being charged it's being fairly charged. So I appreciate you guys' comment.
I just wanted to say, Paul, I didn't mean we're asking for favors or we should expect favors. I totally feel like I've sat in many of these groups and said, we want to get charged for stuff. We want the port to make money. We want to keep going with everything. We just want to, my point was sometimes if somebody was more experienced, they knew like, oh, Living Pacific is unloading. This is the boat that's unloading to Living Pacific. I know him. I'm going to just put this on Living Pacific's bill because they're already here unloading. Like that kind of thing, where it's all in the same, instead of like, oh, who's this guy? And then you end up with like 4 bills for the same service, pretty much, is my point, is everybody's kind of at the same place at the same time. So that's all like in the workings of being there all day long is the stuff that you see. But, and I think everybody that's been hired is great. And I think everything is going really good. And so I don't have no complaints there. So I just want to clarify that.
Thanks for clarifying, but yeah.
So we're moving into the budget cycle, correct? Is that right? Yeah, so this is something that we could spend some more time on, looking at making sure that we're not overcharging. And yeah, I didn't take it, Carrie, to mean that you wanted favors at all. I think I have heard you several times say, yes, we want to be charged, but we just want it to be fair. So let's spend some time looking at that. And I think be responsive to the people that are bringing it forward. And I saw Mark nodding yes, and Paula, so good. Anything else on finances or questions on that one? Okay, let's keep going. Update on Port Dock 5 work, and you're going to wrap into that the electrical upgrade discussion as well, Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to go into what's going on with Port Dock 5, the electrical, and then also a little bit about what I've been working on with permitting and planning wise for the replacement of Port Dock 7, which is related to what we were just a moment ago. We were talking about funding for some of this stuff and how it fits in. I'm not, by no means am I an expert on grants and grant writing, but what I have learned after getting this this EDA grant was that there is a disconnect between the way that people outside the ports and fishing in general view fishing infrastructure and port money to ports. They like Paula mentioned that there's an indirect impact to us because of what's going on with the fishing industry. And the more that we can align that for those who pull the strings on the funding for ports and things like that, I think it will help us a great deal. I've come to, as I've been discussing some of this stuff with people outside the port, I've come to use the term fishing infrastructure because they understand what infrastructure is. They understand, like if you're talking about business infrastructure or for manufacturing or whatever, they know that we're talking about bridges or roads and things like that to get into manufacturing plants, but they don't have a tendency to look at our float docks as infrastructure for some reason. I don't know why that is, but the more that we can push that as a key funding component, I think we'll be more successful in getting some of this stuff done. Something I also want to point out, as we're talking about funding some of this stuff, we're trying to, so for the electrical pedestals that we're looking at doing, we did an increase in moorage. The reason why I keyed in on the moorage rate itself was that in general, as far as all of the expenses for a fishing business, moorage is one of the percentage-wise, it's a smaller percentage. It's a lower bill than a lot of the other ones like insurance and some of your fixed costs and stuff like that. So that's one of the things we're trying to make some changes pricing wise that when applied across the board at the port will change our bottom line so we can fund some of these improvements, but hits the individual businesses less hard. That's what we're trying to do. At Port Dock 5, we got this $1.2 million grant from the EDA that was approved, and it's a $2.4 million project. We're working with the EDA to get through these SACs. They're special award conditions. They're basically conditions that we have to meet in order to get funding from the government. And the way that the grant works is that it's paid back as we go. So as we perform on certain things, we pay for it, and then we get reimbursed half of what we do basically, up to that $1.2 million. So the first step was getting this the certification for the site certification done. We're working with the title company right now on getting our lawyer to sign off on the actual rights to build the project there. And we've got a conference call with them tomorrow. That's the first major hurdle to get through. Although we've already complied with 7 special award conditions as a part of the grant application anyway. I just needed to basically reprove that we did them after we proved the first time that we did them. So we're working on that. We still expect to start on the 1st of November. As soon as we get the site certification done, we can put the project management out to bid and get the construction contracts out to bid as well. So that project should be taken off on the 1st of November, give or take. And I know it's an inconvenient time of year in the commercial marina, but we've got to do it during the in-water work window. We need to do it at the beginning because to make sure that we get the project done on, because there's liable to be things that will happen that will slow it down along the way. However, we've got temporary access written into the project scope, so we should be able to maintain access to Port Dock 5 like we have currently. The Port Dock 5 electrical pedestals, Mark talked about, we're putting that money away right now. The first step will be to get the electrical engineering done so that we can build the scope for the project and then pull the permits and get it out to bid, award a contract, and then pull the permits to do the electrical work. The idea is to put in new pedestals and give 50 amp service down there. So I have requested in this coming year's budget money to get that electrical engineering done, and also to get replacement for equipment and upgrade to electrical on Port Dock 3 in this coming year so that we can stop some of the electrical problems we've got going on down there on Port Dock 3. We've had a couple outages this year that are due to old equipment. And that's the thing about all this stuff is I think everybody pretty well understands this, but our infrastructure is at the point where we can't really delay it very much longer. We need to get this stuff replaced. And at the same time we replace it, we really need to upgrade it so that it's modern and supports everything that you guys do out there. It's really important that we stick to, we keep moving along in a timely fashion, or what'll happen is we are gonna wind up losing facilities. We're gonna, we'll have to shut things down at certain areas. And that's not an exaggeration whatsoever. We were really at that point. Port Dock 7 planning and permitting. So I can't remember where we last talked about this with this particular group, but I put in a section 107 cap request with the Army Corps to establish a federal channel through the commercial marina at a minus 20-foot depth so that you can open up access to the Port Dock 7 area by larger vessels, down to a minus 20-foot channel. The request was approved. The Army Corps bid off on it. This particular program is unique in that it doesn't need to be approved by Congress. It's money that they set aside for the Army Corps to use in a discretionary fashion as they see projects that meet certain parameters. This project met their parameters very well because it is supporting the #1 industry in the region. It's supporting infrastructure upgrades to modernize the infrastructure that supports the #1 industry in the region, and it increases the maneuverability of vessels and adds safety to the marina. So they approved that project. It happens in 3 phases. The first phase is a federal interest determination, which means they do some research to make sure that this is something that rises to the level of federal interest. I think that's going to be an easy argument to make because of the impact that this industry has in the regional economy. And then they also draw up a project scope. Then they come back to the port and they say, all right, here's exactly what the scope of this project was going to look like. The first thing we need to do is a feasibility study. And they present us with a cost share agreement, which is a 50-50 cost share to do a feasibility study on the whole thing. The feasibility study for the Army Corps is basically what would consist of the permitting process for somebody else who that would undertake a project like this. So the Army Corps doesn't really have to get permits. They have to do the feasibility study to answer the same questions like compliance with the with NEPA and Historical Preservation Act requirements and things like that. So the second phase is the feasibility study, and the third phase is construction. The good news about a -20-foot channel is that it only requires a 10% fund match from the port. So we would be getting a lot of dredging done and only having to pay for 10% of it. And then on top of that, we can do in-kind compensation. So for example, they're going to need a dredge disposal site. If we can provide them space on Mount Noah, which we should be able to because we've moved a lot of sand here in the last year or two, then that counts. That counts toward our fund match. I don't know what the rate's going to be like, but it's going to be really cheap dredging, and it'll be if it gets through the feasibility study, okay, it's going to change the marina drastically because it'll open up the eastern end down by England Marine to larger vessels, even more so than what it is right now. The other part of that is that we're in the conceptual phases right now. The tendency to get into the details on this is really strong, but we're nowhere near the detailed level of planning for the docks that a lot of people will want to be. We're right now, the concept that I'm trying to get through the permitting agencies is that we need new docks. They need to be right sized for the modern industry. I mean, building new docks for 38-foot salmon trawlers. We're going to have some of those. We're going to have smaller guys in here. We may even see an increase in different type of smaller commercial vessels in the future, but we need to meet the changes of the consolidation in the various fisheries and provide larger boats with a place to tie up over here. So I had a meeting in February with all of those permitting agencies, and they were pretty receptive to the idea. They understood the impact, financial or the economic impact on the region, both in terms of jobs and money. They know this is a big need for the area, and they were very happy with the amount of, at least the amount of detail we've done so far, and with the concept. The trick now is going to be we will get into the phase with the permitting that we need to give them specifics. Like it's going to be about, okay, well, how much eelgrass exactly do you have, and how, what is what's the sediment like exactly, and they're going to need to do sediment characterization and things like that. So I've got a picture on here of a concept. This is truly just a concept. It could be changed any which way, the size of slips, number of slips, direction of everything. I mean, all of that. But I needed to be able to get a picture in front of them so that they could see what we were talking about doing. Then the lower inset on the right-hand side, you see what we're proposing at the top, and then what is currently there on the bottom. This is like a five-year project. And once it gets to the point, we've included a request in the budget next year for planning toward this type of stuff. And when we get further along in the planning phase, that's when we do a lot of outreach and try to work out some of these details. Try to get this place squared away over here so that it is a lot more functional than what it is currently, and hopefully will be a place that you prefer in the marina over at Port Dock 7. So I would be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Anybody have any questions? Bob?
Yeah, Aaron, when we get this dredging, is there any chance that we'll be able to dredge near the west end of Sweetstock where it's filling in? Can that be done at the same time? So
that's going to be more along the lines of marina dredging. not really prepared in a public setting to lay out the particulars of that problem right now. We have actually on May 7th, during those bigger tides that we have, we're going to do another survey of that area so that we can really define what the problem is. What we need to do is define the solution as well, and then link those two together and start approaching people about paying for that dredging project. But it could be combined to that, but I don't think we can. I don't think we're going to be able to wait that long with that one. I think that's going to need to happen a lot sooner. And like I said, I think the key to that is defining the exact problem as well as a precise solution so that we can start getting it taken. But it's got to be sooner than that, I think.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Aaron, when I look at the whole area inside the seawall there, it just seems to me like reconfiguring might help fit a few more boats in, or dredging down at the east end by England Marine might let some bigger boats use that. But I just see a finite space inside that seawall, and I'm kind of thinking that somehow either we need to identify an additional area where a commercial marina could be built, or this is way outside the box, but there be any possibility of moving that seawall to the south toward the channel and being able to put longer docks out that way? Because I just don't see inside that finite area that we have, as our fleet continues to grow, we're just going to run out of room. And if anybody ever hopes to have a stall of their own, we're going to have more stalls than what that area is going to provide, and especially with boats getting wider and you know, like that. But I mean, that I know that's a holy God kind of a project, but moving that seawall further away from Bay Boulevard might allow for longer docks, which would provide more stalls. But unless there's some other place that we can identify to put boats, we're gonna have to start thinking outside the box here, because our box isn't big enough.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that, really, because you're right. We got to find that amount of space inside the commercial marina, and it's not really that big. Of course, all of it's got to be tempered by permitting somehow. You know, permitting and of course cost. But I have a sense that, you know, if you have an industry that's that vital to the health of the region, you can probably find out a way to fund projects for that industry at some point. But I think so. The idea here is that we get Port Dock 7 functional and rebuilt, and then in the next 5 years we could possibly add space over at Port Dock 5. Because I think you're right, there's this finite amount of space, but if I wanted to mount a counter argument, which is what we're going to run up against, we're going to run up against people that will say, you know, you can't change the bay that much, you can't do all these other things. Their strongest argument is going to be, well, you need to do with what you have first. And if we can really maximize what we have first, the other variable that will be removed from the conversation is we'll have a much better idea what the industry is going to look like at that point in time. And the problem will be there, that's for sure. But it'll be a lot easier to pin it down and harder to shoot down the project. I don't know if that makes it, if I made any sense there, but that's my idea. Aside from that, we do own some property upriver between the terminal and the entrance to the commercial marina over there by the just east of the Barcadero. We own some bank in there too, and it would be really tough to get permits and things like that, but someday if we needed to, that might be a decent location as well. But yeah, a lot of that's above my pay grade. So
I had exactly the same comments as you did, Aaron. I look at it the same way. I think from projects that I've seen like that, you have to first demonstrate the need. So I think we need to grow into what we have in mind at this point. And if we get beyond that, then we have to demonstrate, saying mostly because of permitting, not only permitting, but also funding. Because anything we do on our own, just because we want more spaces, the funds got to come out of our pockets. Where if we go to where we need it to be and we can demonstrate that need, I think it's much easier for us to obtain funds from either state or federal levels. So.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that we have a need. So, well, hopefully we can keep working together on that. If I recall, a year ago, we had been turning boats away that wanted to come to Newport, several boats. So I think we have a demonstrated need. I mean, and if we didn't have access to the terminal right now for the larger boats that are there, we'd have a massive problem over at 5 and 7. So those are good comments, but I mean, I think we do have a need. I think, Erin, you've done a tremendous amount of work. I really appreciate the stuff that you've done. And I guess we just have to keep moving forward, but I agree with Mike too about thinking outside the box. And one of the things about funding too, I appreciated your comments about fishing infrastructure and how people think about that in terms of funding. Like with this whole COVID-19 issue, making a connection between needing more docks and the impacts from COVID-19, that doesn't exist, right? But the fact that people's businesses may suffer or are suffering, there could be other ways to make those connections through COVID-19 for thinking outside the box, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because it's not a direct connection of, well, we need more docks and this is a result of COVID-19. We need more docks because the fishing industry has been growing, it's been successful, and Newport is the place that people want to be at, right? Because you have the shipyards upriver, you've got all manner of supply. I mean, it really is a one-stop shop port, and people want to be a part of that port. So I just think there's a lot of different moving parts there. Go ahead, Paula.
I just want to, in what you just said, that we have the need already. We don't dispute that at all. As a matter of fact, what we're looking at it in our coming budget is to put out some, we're asking for funds to include a plan and some ideas we already have to address some of those issues. So the only difference here is that, as Erin said, and I mentioned, is we would address our immediate needs within that box, for the time being. So I think there are ways that we can address some of that now. And that's what we're going to be asking our commissioners, is to approve this funds that we have. We are asking for to do some plans, because first you cannot get any monies without plans. You know that. So we have to put together a plan in order to go out there and do some of this that we're trying to identify and address that immediate need. Because you're right, having a capacity of a need of 110%, of our marina, we got to go beyond that. So as we address that, then we need to start looking for the future, because we all know that once you address that, in no time that will fill out. And that's the part that we have to wait to get to that phase, get those funds, get that address, and then we possibly can look beyond that box. So that was my comment.
Carrie?
I would say, adding to what you say about what you were kind of saying about how COVID-19 is affecting fisheries or need for growth in the port, growth opportunities is, COVID-19 is also creating where we're noticing U.S. food production. And so what food is coming from the U.S. and that's what I would use looking towards grants. If you're looking for anything towards COVID is we are food and we are providing food to Americans and the opportunity to food. And that's something that needs to be supported and infrastructure needs to be built to protect in general for farmers or fishermen. And that is going to become a huge thing. And we don't know how this will end up. It is changing. Consumers' minds are changing. I do market seafood to U.S. consumers as well through the Chelsea Rose at the dock. And we're seeing a huge change in consumerism, and people are looking to where their food came from. And that could increase the demand, as well as we worry about the sales of fish, it could increase the demand for fish in the future. And good protein, we're offering a protein. We're talking about pork shortages, all these different shortages. There's not a shortage of fish. We want to go fishing for them, and we need a place to park and safe facilities.
Yeah, I think those are really good comments. I was on a call earlier with some folks in DC and around the country, and USDA got something like $6 trillion in the CARES Act, and almost all of it has been earmarked for non-seafood. It's all, terrestrial farming and other agriculture and meat production. But I think you make a really good point. And I've been encouraging people to try hake, right? They don't eat hake. We need to sell more hake domestically, so, and pollock. But yeah, you make really good points. So let's keep talking. Go ahead.
A question that's related to infrastructure that I was hoping to be able to pose to the group.
Sure. Yeah.
So this goes back to what I think Gene brought up, the issue with especially smaller boats, and I've noticed this over the last couple of years. So it's, tied in with that bait problem over at the hoist dock. So smaller boats are much more likely to bypass the hoist and hand carry stuff back and forth because they run a lot closer to their margins. As things change or go about at the port. So I was looking at Port Dock 7. Do you guys think that there is a demand or a call for specific services for smaller boats that could be installed down at the float dock level that they would actually use and would be economical to provide? Like something like if we could figure out a way to put a smaller swing hoist on a float dock, so that, a 40-foot glass boat or a 45-foot glass boat that was doing whatever would that be used, do you guys think? And if so, how can we build it in a way that will discourage people from trying to cram a larger boat in there and overuse it so it degrades it?
Carrie?
I was waiting for maybe a fisherman to pipe up first that had better view, different views, like Mike, who just raised his hand, who has a boat at Dock 7, who is fiberglass and under that. But I would say that we've been hearing about that for years. In the 15 years I've been unloading, 15 seasons at the port, they've been talking about an extension out kind of to where our office is, extending into the shallower there with dock for a crane. That used to be the big talk, was another swing, adding an extra swing hoist out there. And obviously that would only be used for a certain, size of vessel because of the area, and it take some dredging. But I think the manual hoist, having only 2, we are, not counting the one at the terminal, it does limit what's available to happen. And with all the extra use at the port right now, having an extra hoist for people to be able to load and things like that while unloading's happening or other things are happening, rigging is happening, is always going to be a benefit to boats, especially if it's accessible to small boats. And you can always put a restriction on there, length restriction would be what I would say. So there's my.
Yeah, Carrie, I agree with you 100%. The east end where your office is would be perfect. It's shallow water, which would definitely discourage the bigger boats entirely. Other than that, I can't think of a single place that would fit.
Mike, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Just what Gene was talking about, where would it fit? I think if a guy was going to do something like that, maybe an extension off of England Marine's dock, down where the old launch ramp used to be, you might be able to put a little hoist in there. I think there's decent water in there. To Aaron's point about trying to keep people from, if you built a lightweight hoist, I think you've been around long enough to know that people are going to try to do whatever they think they can make happen sometimes, and your equipment is going to get tested, I guess would be a nice way to say it. I think it would be a bit naive to think if I fit in there and I can get underneath that hoist with my truck, whatever I got in my truck is likely going to get swung over the boat if we think it's going to work. So I'm thinking maybe the place down by England Marine, there's decent water down there, and if you came, away from England Marine, extended a pier a little ways away, you might be able to put a hoist there in an area that I think there's decent water in there, and that might work. But some of those guys at Dock 7, they're just wired a little different. I don't know. I never packed bait down the dock myself, but the guy I got running the challenge now, I don't know. I see him. He has the ability to drive over to a fish plant and have them hoist it right down on the deck, and yet he has them put it in the back of his truck and he hand carts it down the dock. I tell him he's making us look bad by doing that, but it doesn't. I said, "What are you doing?" And that's just the way he wants to do it. So I don't know if a hoist would help him or not. So I don't know if I helped any, but anyway.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I just wanted to bounce that off of some people. It's just something that, as I was listening to some of the really small boat guys here recently, those kind of things came to my mind. And I like to make facilities so that, making rules and telling people they can't do something is like 10 times harder than building it so that it can't be done, or configuring it some way so that but like you said, Mike, people are motivated and they do just about anything they can possibly figure out. So anyway.
Fishermen are crafty. Any other comments on this one? Well, thanks for that, Aaron. Future considerations. I guess this would be where we might talk about how we want to move forward with the committee in terms of our meeting schedule. We do have 2 commissioners on. Jeff's on and Jim Burke is on. And I don't know if this is putting you 2 on the spot, but is it the commission's desire that we meet more frequently? Is it the commission's? We are here to provide input to you all and recommendations and bring forward problems, but also we are all super busy. And so we don't want people taking the time to meet if we don't really have something to talk about and provide. Obviously, we were overdue getting together. We should have scheduled something sooner so that we could meet Paula and just get acquainted and all that. But so I don't know, Jeff or Jim, if you have any comments as commissioners, do you see a role you know, as we're moving forward and providing some input to you through the budget process, through the Pork.5, and what do you think?
Heather, this is Jim.
Yeah, hi Jim.
Hi there.
Turn off your video.
All right, I'll turn it on. I was multitasking. I mean, eating my lunch.
Okay.
I know it's kind of been a as needed, but a year is too far. I think we were starting to hear some disconnect grumblings. Squid votes might be a good example of that, but it might be good just to check in biannually and then as needed above that, perhaps. I think it's a healthy conversation to have, to stay in tune with, you know, the largest user group of the port. So my opinion is it should be at least twice a year, or as things come up.
Okay. Jeff?
Jeff?
You know, I think the budget process is a real nexus for the fishing industry. I don't know whether it would be more helpful on the front end or the back end, probably both really, because as you're going into the budget process, getting input from fishermen on everything, projects, issues, rates and fees. It's nice to get that input going into the budget process because everything's decided in the budget process, what the rates and fees are, what the project priorities are, and informing, letting the commissioners know and staff know is very helpful on the front end. And on the back end, it'd almost be more of a informational thing. The communication would probably more flow to the fishing industry, because it would inform the fishing industry. Here's what the rates and fees are. Here's the priorities on projects. Here's what's going on once everything's decided. So I don't know. I agree with Jim. Twice a year would be good. You don't want to have to meet more often than you need to, but I think communication both ways around the budget process would be the most important thing, I would think.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there was a real stark difference in how our process went last time we went through the budget process, where Aaron sat us down, he went through line by line, he talked about rationale for the changes compared to what had happened previously with Doug Parsons, who made a bunch of changes without consulting with the fishing industry and then just put it out there. I think that the budget process is a really good time on the front end and the back end, because I think some of the increases were things that we actually came up with. I think we went higher than some of the things that were proposed in some areas and then lower in others. And I think this year in particular, with COVID-19 and the impacts that we're only just beginning to feel in the industry, might be a really good time to have a lot of communication as we go through that process. Paula, did you have anything additional to add to what Jim and Jeff said?
No, I agree with both of them. I think twice a year at least, and if we have other issues such as like the squid boat issues or others that we convene. But I think for the port, on the port side, I think it's good for us to inform you as well, you know, to keep you guys aware of what we're doing and how long in the process we are. Say we put something on the budget and you may want to know how far are we on those projects as well. And I think that is certainly helpful. Like right now, we, at least in our list that we are gonna provide to the commissioners, there are several projects that are mostly related to the commercial docks, you know, and some of those are for future considerations, such as like the dredging, you know, and all this work. But there are some money involved with getting those things done, and I guess you guys are the ones to tell the commissioners how important those things are. And so certainly helpful, especially during this time of the year.
Okay. And you sparked my memory too, that I had written down. I wanted to commend the port, and it maybe Angela's doing as well, but I really have appreciated seeing, you know, Facebook posts from the port. I really like how the website has come out and how you're keeping it, it's not static, things are changing and you're providing updates. And so that's over the last year been really good to see. So I think that that's been great.
Really kudos to Angela on keeping on top of that. That's why, again, it's one of the things we put in our budget to have a PR person, because sometimes we're busy bees, you know, doing our thing, and those type of things don't get put out there, what people are doing and how busy the port is and everyone involved with the port. So Angela has been great in getting out there, taking pictures, writing stories, not once in a while doing some press releases, but definitely keeping up with Facebook, where a lot of people are looking and making comments. So again, glad to have her on board and doing some of this work, and I'm glad you're recognizing that.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, everything was negative, right? Any press we got was always negative or complaining, or I don't know, but it's just nice to see the positive stuff being highlighted, because I think there's been a lot of really good things happening at the port. So good job to Angela. Jeff.
One additional thing to add on about commercial fishery users group meeting and when they would be appropriate, probably this year with Port Dock 5 project. In advance of that would be a good time for one.
Okay. Great. Any other comments on anything? Well, then I think we'll wrap up this meeting. Karen, thank you so much for getting everything organized and keeping us honest here on the Zoom, making sure everybody's identified. It is really a different way to be operating. And I don't know about some of you, but I'm usually busy. I'm more busy now than I've ever been. I'm trying to meet the challenges of COVID-19, and I have learned I am not a talented homeschooler. I am not an interested homeschooler. I would like my kids to be back at school. So, but yeah, it's just busy trying to attend council meetings by webinar. I mean, it's just really, it's a different way of operating, but I'm really impressed with the technology. And I mean, this is not a bad, I'd rather we were in person, but this is not a bad way to communicate. So appreciate everyone taking the time. Mark, great job. I've heard really great things from everybody that's interacted with you at the port. And so we're really glad to have you on board. And Paula, we're hearing great things about you too. So that's really all I have. And unless anybody else has comments, we'll adjourn. Okay, thanks everybody.